Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Marani ki jai, Gonitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we're reading from Canto 11, Chapter 3, and it's text 27 through 28, combined text. Shravanam Kirtanam Jnanam Hare Adbhuta Karmanam Janma Karma Gunanam Cham Tadarte Kila Chestitam Shravanam Kirtanam Jnanam Hare Adbhuta Karmanam Janma Karma Gunanam Cham Tadarte Kila Chestitam Shravanam Kirtanam Jnanam Hare Adbhuta Karmanam Janma Karma Gunanam Tadarte Kila Chestitam. Please chant. Shravanam Kirtanam Jnanam Hare Adbhuta Karmanam Janma Karma Gunanam Cha Tadarte Kila Chestitam. Shravanam Kirtanam Jnanam Hare Adbhuta Karmanam Janma Karma Gunanam Cha Tadarte Kila Chestitam. Thank you very much for chanting. I'll just read text 28 or chant text 28, and we'll do the word for text 27. Ishtam datam tapo japtam vritam chak chatmana priyam dharan sutan grihan pranan yad parasmai nivedanam. And the word for word. Shravanam, hearing. Kirtanam, chanting. Jnanam, and meditation. Hare, of the Supreme Lord Hari. Adbhuta Karmana, whose activities are wonderful. Janma, of his incarnations. Karma, pastimes. Gunanam, transcendental qualities. Cha, and tat arte, for his sake. Akila, all. Chestitam, endeavors. Okay. So, proceeding to the translation. So, this is a BBT translation, and so is the purport. One should hear, glorify, and meditate upon the wonderful transcendental activities of the Lord. One should specifically become absorbed in the appearance, activities, qualities, and holy names of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus inspired, one should perform all of one's daily activities as an offering to the Lord. One should perform sacrifice, charity, and penance exclusively for the Lord's satisfaction. Similarly, one should chant only those mantras which glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And all one's religious activities should be performed as an offering to the Lord. Whatever one finds pleasing or enjoyable, he should immediately offer to the Supreme Lord, and even his wife, children, home, and very life air he should offer at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The purport. In Bhagavad Gita 9:27, Lord Krishna has ordered, Yat karoshi yad ashnasi yad juhosi dadasi yat tat tapasyasi kunteya tat kurushva mad arpanam. O son of Kunti, all that you do, all that you eat, all that you offer and give away, and all austerities that you perform should be done as an offering to me. Srila Prabhupada has commented on this verse as follows, quote, thus, it is the duty of everyone to mold his life in such a way that he will not forget Krishna in any circumstance. Everyone has to work. Everyone has to work for maintenance of his body and soul together. And Krishna recommends herein that one should work for him. Everyone has to eat something to live. Therefore, he should accept the remnants of foodstuffs offered to Krishna. Any civilized man has to perform some religious, ritualistic ceremonies. Therefore, Krishna recommends, quote, do it for me, close quote. And this is called archanam. Everyone has a tendency to give something in charity. Krishna says, give it to me. And this means that all surplus money accumulated should be utilized in furthering the Krishna consciousness movement. Nowadays, people are very much inclined to the meditational process, which is not practical in this age. But if anyone practices meditating on Krishna 24 hours by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra around his beads, he is surely the greatest yogi, as substantiated by the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, close quote. Many persons who become attracted to the devotional service of Krishna are bewildered by the material possessions, reputation, or skills they have accumulated by their previous material activities. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, these two verses indicate that all such material opulences accumulated by one's previous karma should be used as an offering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One's fame, education, wealth, and so on should all be used to carry out the mission of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sometimes envious materialists ask why one should waste one's wealth and education in the Lord's service when such things could be better used to gratify the temporary material body. Actually, however, whatever we possess, including this body, is ultimately the property of the Supreme Lord, who is the creator, maintainer, and annihilator of all existence. Therefore, one should be blessed by dovetailing one's so-called opulences in the devotional service of the Lord. Otherwise, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, Mritu Sarva Harash Chaham, the Supreme Lord will appear before us at the time of death as Mritu, death personified, and violently take away all of our possessions. Therefore, such possessions should be peacefully offered to the lotus feet of the Lord while we are still living and able to enjoy the pious result of such an offering. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, tapa, austerity, means that one should observe vows such as Ekadasi Vrata, in which one fasts from grains and beans twice a month. The word Japtam refers to chanting the holy names of the Lord, such as Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has further pointed out that one can offer one's wife, children, and home to the Lord by converting one's family into devotees of the Supreme Lord. Rather than becoming artificially puffed up in the pursuit of so-called status symbols, one's family should be trained to understand that they are eternal servants of the Supreme Lord. And when the entire family becomes dedicated to the Lord's service, a very beautiful situation is created. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has pointed out that if a human being is not initiated into the process of Bhagavad Dharma, he must depend upon the uncertain knowledge derived from his gross material senses. Indifferent to the sublime descriptions of the Lord's eternal appearances, pastimes, and innumerable transcendental qualities, the faithless materialist wanders about on the platform of mundane enjoyment. But if one can understand the reality of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as he is described in authorized Vedic literature, then one should accept the order of Tridanda Sannyas, or at least one should practice restraint of the body, mind, and words, and thus become self-controlled and fixed in the absolute truth. Then all of one's desires, all the charity he gives, and his penances and chanting of mantras, in other words, his entire personality, his home, his children, his wife, and his very life air, become heartfelt offerings to the Supreme Lord. When a living entity constantly hears the authorized descriptions of the Supreme Lord and dovetails all of his activities in the Lord's service, avoiding other activities, he is considered to be fixed on the platform of Bhagavad Dharma. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Shah Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavan Ishwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhe Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimata Romapada Swami Iti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimata Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I'll just read the translation of the two texts again. One should hear, glorify, and meditate upon the wonderful transcendental activities of the Lord. One should specifically become absorbed in the appearance, activities, qualities, and holy names of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus inspired, one should perform all of one's daily activities as an offering to the Lord. One should perform sacrifice, charity, and penance exclusively for the Lord's satisfaction. Similarly, one should chant only those mantras which glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And all one's religious activities should be performed as an offering to the Lord. Whatever one finds pleasing or enjoyable, he should immediately offer to the Supreme Lord. And even his wife, children, home, and very life air, he should offer at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In looking at Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on these two texts, and some of his comment was brought up in the purport, So I'm going to just read one of the sentences that come from his purport, and this is what he says. So it's his breaking down this verse, sort of summarizing it, and this is what he says. One should learn to perform sacrifice to Vishnu, and the word was Ishtam, and the translation for the word when we were doing it is whatever worship one performs. And he continues, and to give in charity to Vishnu and the devotees, and to perform vows like Ekadasi. So there's a listing of activities that need to be learnt. That's what he says, it needs to be learnt. It actually immediately calls for a distinction to be made. So there are activities that are performed for a result, and activities that are performed which leads to advanced spiritual knowledge. So that's a distinction that needs to be made immediately. The activities have a different end result, and the motivation for the activity is different. In the one hand, the activities that are done for a specific result, and on the other hand, activities that lead to spiritual elevation. So activities for some purpose may indeed be sacrifices. So they fall into the religious realm. So, for example, somebody may wish to attain a good son, or somebody may wish to attain the higher planets. So some religious sacrifice will be done, but it's with a very specific purpose in mind. And Srila Prabhupada gives a prohibition that touches on this particular distinction between the two kinds of activities that are there. And this is what he says. Sacrifices prompted by desires should be stopped immediately. However, sacrifice for the purification of one's heart or for advancement in spiritual science should not be given up. So that's the important distinction. He's actually indicating that even those activities with that very specific result done in a religious context, they actually should be stopped. So this comes from Bhagavad Gita 18.2 purport. Srila Prabhupada's very fearless. So here, the listing of activities, sacrifice, the ones that were listed both in the verse and Srila Vishwanath, he's saying sacrifice, charity, and penance. By being offered to Lord Vishnu, one can understand falls into the category of activities that lead to purification of one's heart and allow one to advance in spiritual science. So the critical factor is that they're being offered to Lord Vishnu. So one's not thinking, I'm going to get this result. I will advance spiritually, or my heart's going to get cleansed. I'm not doing it for that purpose. But one is doing it for Lord Vishnu. And then the benefit that's coming automatically is that the heart is getting cleansed and one's advancing in spiritual science. It's extremely subtle. It's not as gross as, now I'm going to get a perfect son, or I can be sure I'm going to go to the heavenly planets. It's a very subtle progression. And Lord Krishna, he points to the importance of sacrifice himself. And this is what he says to Arjuna. He declares it to Arjuna. O best of the Kuru dynasty, without sacrifice, one can never live happily on this planet or in this life. What then of the next? So that could, one could also consider that why you see so much unhappiness is because there's lack of sacrifice. So that was from Bhagavad Gita 4:31. So it allows for being able to live happily. So, of course, these are sacrifices to Lord Vishnu. So the significance of performing sacrifice becomes clear when the picture is painted of one's material existence, because, you can actually say, okay, I'm in this material world, so I'm hearing this, the importance of sacrifice, allowing for happy living, but, let me understand a bit more about what situation I'm in. So here's the picture of the situation one is in. And this is coming from Srila Prabhupada, Bhagavad Gita 431 purport. Whatever form of material existence one is invariably ignorant of his real situation. So that's rather alarming. One is in a situation, but actually you're ignorant of what's going on. I mean, that's quite profound if you think about it. You're existing, you're living, you're thinking you're living, but actually you're ignorant of what's happening. So that's very terrifying in one sense. So the reason one is ignorant of one's real situation is that existing in this material world is in itself the result of multiple reactions to our lives. So coming from previous lives, and we're not aware of it. In the particular purport we were reading today, there was a recounting of the reactions being very positive, like, one's got lots of wealth, etc., and how one should use it. But actually, these reactions are to sinful life, which comes from being ignorant. So just the fact that we're existing and life is going on, it's actually reaction from previous life, multiple reactions. And the Vedas are what give the opportunity to escape the ignorance. So you actually have to, although you may be existing, you may be living and imagining that you're living to the fullest, it actually is a state of ignorance. So reference has to be made by consulting the Vedas to allow one to escape the ignorance. So by performing yagya or sacrifice, because that was the particular topic that was being covered by Srila Vishwanath and Sri Antariksha in the verse from today. So by performing yagya or sacrifice on the path of religion, different sacrifices are appropriate for different types of people. So, and of course, the consciousness in which the sacrifices are performed is important. So that consciousness, and I'm going to look first at the consciousness in which sacrifice is performed. That consciousness is described such that, so these are for all different types of people, just to allow them to break that ignorance. So here's some of the consciousness that's necessary in order to be able to perform sacrifice properly. So the consciousness is described such that one works without being attached to sense gratification. So you're performing a sacrifice and you're doing that work without actually thinking how it's going to please your senses in some way. Lord Krishna's words, these are his words from Bhagavad Gita 4:20. Another of Krishna's words is that the consciousness with which one's performing some activity or sacrifice, one abandons all attachment to the result of his activities. So you're not holding on to what's coming. You're just letting it go. You perform the sacrifice and you let it go. That's Bhagavad Gita 4:21, again, Lord Krishna's words. Next part of consciousness is give up all sense of proprietorship over your possessions and act only for the bare necessities of life. And that's again by Lord Krishna's words from Bhagavad Gita 4:21. So this kind of consciousness means that one's actions produce no reaction. So that's actually the consciousness one has to have in performing any kind of sacrifice. And of course, particularly sacrifices to Lord Vishnu, Lord Krishna. So anyway, something immediately comes to my mind. Like I've sometimes been the recipient of some charitable action coming from someone, but then what happens is you can see that the charity is being given with attachment to the result, because persons will check if I'm using the item that was given. Or, so that's attachment to what was given. So you're not supposed to have that kind of attachment to the result of your activity. You let it go. The person may not use it, the person may discard it, even it does not matter. What was important was performing the activity with the correct consciousness. I'm letting go, this is what I'm giving. So I'm just smiling because I'm remembering. So it's important to have that kind of consciousness, because then no reaction comes from it. Otherwise, there's some reaction that's coming from it. So there's freedom from the bondage of reactions. That's the words that are used, freedom from the bondage of actions, because every action you form is binding you again to material life. So the way to not be bound to material life is to have the proper consciousness. So particularly this one of not being attached to the results of one's activities, and you're not actually working because you're attached to some way that is going to please your senses. So, and this kind of consciousness, when one is performing a sacrifice, is going to free one from sin. So it's interesting, because one doesn't think that even giving something could produce sin. But it does if the consciousness is not correct. If it's not like, you let go, you've given it, but you're still holding on to what result you're going to get from it, means some sinful activity will come in some way that is still binding one to material life. So in the same way that Sri Antariksha tells King Nimi that one should perform all one's daily activities as an offering to the Lord. That's how he puts it. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he comments that one should learn how to perform sacrifice to Lord Vishnu. So it's not so easy. You need to learn how to do it. And in summary, Srila Prabhupada, he puts it this way: the freedom from the bondage of action is only possible in Krishna consciousness, when one is doing everything for Krishna. So even if one is actually performing some action that is charitable, one has to learn how to do it properly. I'm using that example because I've been exposed to it quite a few times. One has to be doing it for Krishna. So you've performed that act of charity, but it's done for Krishna, for pleasing Krishna. You now are not responsible for seeing how that charity is being used, where it's going to, what is the effect of your having given that charity. No, it's been done to please Lord Krishna, and that is all. So in terms of the different sacrifices that are appropriate for different types of people, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains, and this is how he explains it. The different people are capable of performing different sacrifices. So some persons may not actually be able to learn how to perform sacrifices for Lord Krishna or Lord Vishnu. So he has a description of the different kinds of sacrifices that are there and the different kinds of people that perform these sacrifices. So this is how Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains it. There are as many kinds of yogas as there are sacrifices or yagyas. If we were to try and identify them all, that number would be countless. This is Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. When dividing them scientifically, all yagnas or sacrifices can be classified into two categories: karma yagya, karma sacrifice or formal sacrifice, and yagya, jnana yagya, or spiritual cultivation. So those are actually the two broad categories of sacrifice. Formal sacrifice or sacrifice for spiritual cultivation. The karma yogis, because anytime one's performing sacrifice, it means you're actually in some yogic process. You're trying to transcend material existence in some way. So the karma yogis, they perform yagyas or sacrifice to please the demigods. And as a result, the demigods such as Indra and Varuna, in whom Krishna is designated authority, they become satisfied. Gradually, such karma yogis come to the platform of selfless karma yoga. So even with the motivation, over time, by doing that kind of formal sacrifice to the demigods, the karma yogis, they do actually become selfless. They stop thinking, what am I getting from it? They start actually performing it to please the demigods over time. So it's very interesting that is the result. And the jnana yogis, so those that are performing sacrifice for spiritual cultivation, they have as their slogan the Vedic statement, Tat Tvam Asi. So they chant the mantra Om and sacrifice the Tvam or spirit soul into the Tat or Brahman. So because of work that my husband has been doing, we get exposed to yoga studios. And generally, whoever's leading the yoga studio is very adamant that they want to hear the word Om chanted before one begins anything. And this is because it's a jnana yogi. It's a yogi who is actually trying to have some spiritual advancement. And so they actually need to chant the mantra Om because they're sacrificing the spirit soul into the Brahman or the Tat. So that's the explanation for that necessity to chant the Om mantra for jnana yogis, which are many of the yoga studios. So another category of yogi is the practitioner who observes strict celibacy. So that means that they can also sacrifice their senses, such as hearing, into the fire of mental control. So that's another yogi. Householders can sacrifice the objects of the senses, so all the things that give one pleasure, into the fire of the senses. So you're not holding on to it. So this is all from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, describing from Bhagavad Gita 4.26 these different categories, the two main categories of sacrifices, and then the different persons, the different yogis who try and perform sacrifice, how they do it. And then there's yogis like Patanjali, who propagated the philosophy of merging into the existence of Brahman. And these yogis search after self-realization, and they sacrifice all their sensual activities as well as the activities of the 10 types of life air into the fire of the pure spirit soul. So it's a very subtle process that they're engaged in. So there's a distinction that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur makes regarding two different kinds of spirit souls. So this is very interesting. I mean, we're hearing of the different categories of yogis, the different kinds of sacrifices that are performed by the different yogis, because anybody who's performing sacrifice falls into the category of being a yogi, trying to transcend material existence. Actually, there's a breakdown of two categories of spirit souls, which is so interesting. So one never thinks of this, but there's a spirit soul who's inclined towards material enjoyment, and that is called Parag Atma. And then there's the spirit soul who's inclined towards renunciation, and that's called Pratyag Atma. So two different kinds of spirit souls. Even on a spiritual level, there's those that are inclined towards material enjoyment, those that are inclined towards renunciation. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that sacrifice can be divided into 4 categories. So he's done a breakdown of all the different kinds of yogis, or at least prominent ones. And now he says that sacrifice can be divided into 4 categories. So there's Dravya Yagya, or sacrifice of one's possessions. There's Tapo Yagya, or performing severe austerities. So this is a very popular one, performing severe austerities. If one goes to a certain area of India, one will see that there are yogis who, do that whole thing of actually circumambulating Govardhan Hill, where they're placing their whole body prostrate. Instead of taking physical steps with the feet, the whole body is used flat on the floor all the way around Govardhan Hill. So that's a severe austerity. And another one, of course, is the Chaturmasya, where, and we hear it of even ISKCON devotee in Vrindavan having done this. Just actually not utilizing the proper limbs to perform eating. So you're not having the comfort of using your hand, bringing the food stuff to the mouth, but rather you just actually bring the mouth directly to the food stuff. So very uncomfortable. And because you're having to bend, it's also constricting the stomach, so you can actually eat much less. So severe austerity. Or another category of sacrifice may be mastering the 8-fold mystic perfections. Becoming small, becoming very large, being able to reach an object from a distant place. And Jnana Yagya, another category of sacrifice, is cultivating the power to discriminate between spirit and matter. So these are 4 categories of sacrifice, as explained by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And those who perform these 4 kinds of sacrifice are understood to have taken strict vows. So that's sacrifice where you actually have taken a vow to perform those sacrifices for a specific period of time. So apart from these sacrifices is that of Hatha Yoga, which is very popular in the present time. And this is also a sacrifice because the practitioner tries to regulate the movement of the prana vayu into the apana vayu, and the apana vayu into the prana vayu. So they're trying to control the movement of the life airs going up and down. And they gradually try to regulate the movement of both pranas and asanas and practice yoga exercises known as kumbhaka. So this is also a sacrifice. It's also a sacrifice to be doing this. So all these practitioners know the meaning of sacrifice and become purified of all sinful reactions by performing sacrifice. So even everybody who's attending a yoga studio is actually performing a sacrifice, and they're actually getting purified of sinful reactions. So very interesting. So having looked at the different practitioners of sacrifice and the kinds of sacrifice performed, we can return to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, because he continues with the kind of sacrifice one should learn to perform for Lord Vishnu. So he says one should learn to chant japa using Vishnu mantras and have proper conduct. And the word that was used was vritam for conduct, and is translated as pious activities being performed. So one should learn to offer articles dear to oneself to Lord Vishnu. So it's not that, somebody may perform a sacrifice of giving away one's possessions, but maybe giving things that they don't want, or they've used already and it's got of no further use to them. So that's not how one actually performs a sacrifice to Lord Vishnu. One offers things that are dear to oneself. One gives away something that's very dear to oneself. So it may be a chunk of finance, perhaps, or something that, is important to oneself. That's what one gives to Lord Vishnu or Lord Krishna. And then Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, one should learn to offer things extending to wife, sons, and house to the Lord. And that was mentioned in the purport. This means that one should learn to engage wife, house, and sons in the service of the Lord. So you're not giving them away. You're actually teaching them how to actually worship or perform service to Lord Krishna. So these again are sacrifices that are for the purification of the heart and advancement in spiritual science. So you can see it's a much more intricate kind of sacrifice, because not everybody takes to the chanting of japa or the Maha Mantra on beads. It's a very intricate, very deliberate sacrifice, understanding it's for the pleasure of Lord Vishnu, Lord Krishna. It's quite an advanced sacrifice, one can say. So, of course, if one looks at the idea of trying to understand, which is what Srila Vishwanath is saying, you need to learn it, it may be necessary to break down this topic of sacrifice. So one may have to take the whole picture into account. So there's the problem with ignorance in living a material existence. And there's the problem of being consistent, seeing that the breakdown of sacrifice looks at yogis in different categories, all of whom are freed from sinful reactions through their type of sacrifice, which we did, and also trying to look at the means. And that's what's been proposed by Srila Vishwanath, that are consistent with the end. So the means you are using has to be consistent with the end. So in the case of Srila Vishwanath and Sri Antariksha in this verse, these recommendations of sacrifices are for purifying the heart and advancing in spiritual knowledge. So if one examines if there's consistency between the means that are being used and the end that is for Lord Vishnu, and it will allow for one's heart to be cleansed and for spiritual advancement to happen, if we look at the chanting of japa, one can begin by saying what Lord Krishna states: of the great sages, I'm Bhrigu. Of vibrations, I'm the transcendental Om. Of sacrifices, I'm the chanting of the holy name. So imagine. And of immovable things, I'm the Himalayas. That's what Krishna says, Bhagavad Gita 10:25. So the chanting of the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, is in fact the purest representation of Krishna. Or among sacrifices, he is japa. So extraordinary, because he's actually none different from the chanting of his names. So Srila Prabhupada, in fact, identifies japa as the means to attain the end, because that's what we're looking at. Is it a good means to attain the end you want? And the end is being able to think of Lord Krishna, because in material life, it's very difficult. So is this means of chanting japa a good means for that end, to be able to think of Krishna? So this is how Srila Prabhupada explains. Because we're looking at what Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, if we want to learn how to do these sacrifices properly. So this is how Srila Prabhupada explains it. So we're learning. We capture each bead. So you're capturing the bead, you're holding on to that bead, chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One bead equals 16 times. This is Srila Prabhupada, so you're saying the name 16 times. So the whole bead chain, there are 108 beads. This is Srila Prabhupada talking. So one round means about 1,700 times he's saying the name of Lord Krishna. This comes from a book called Chanting Hare Krishna, where Srila Prabhupada's talking, because we're looking at what Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is recommending. You learn how to do it. And this is what Srila Prabhupada further says about chanting japa. Concentrate fully on the sound vibration of the mantra, pronouncing each name distinctly, and gradually your speed in chanting will increase naturally. Do not worry so much about chanting fast. Most important is the hearing. So that's learning how to do it properly. Say the names very clearly, you can hear them distinctly, and you actually hear them. So learning to have proper conduct, that was the other recommendation of the sacrifice. And Srila Prabhupada says, so this is, I'm going to include a story that explains something about proper conduct. And this is Srila Prabhupada talking. We should push Krishna consciousness as a disinfecting agent. They are all infected, the whole world. So by chanting, you disinfect. So imagine, that's what he's seeing, that the whole world has got some kind of infection. So you actually need to disinfect the whole world, and the way you disinfect is by chanting the Maha Mantra. And in a conversation he's having, there's a devotee called Umapati, and Umapati asked him, just by our presence chanting there, is that what's going to disinfect the world? Srila Prabhupada says, yes. Therefore, chanting is so important. First of all, Cheto Darpana Marjanam, cleansing the heart. Cleansing the heart. So by hearing this chanting, their heart will be cleansed gradually. So we have the experience of doing a monthly, at least the last one of the year was done just recently, but exposing persons to this process of cleansing the heart. They actually are hearing the Maha Mantra through the Harinam. In the whole streets of Chicago, persons that are walking and are passing the Harinam, going about their business, the sound vibration is entering the heart, and the heart is actually getting cleansed. So extraordinary is this. So it's like Krishna is actually in the holy name. They're getting exposed to Lord Krishna. Very extraordinary. Then they will understand the real position. That's Srila Prabhupada. So we have to do this chanting, not sitting down in a solitary place chanting himself. No, not like that. You are to vibrate the sound for the benefit of others. So that's the sacrifice that's required. Sacrifice for others, for the benefit of others. So we have to commend our Russian community that organizes the Harinam, because it's actually a sacrifice for the benefit of others. So that's all coming from this book entitled Chanting Hare Krishna, where Srila Prabhupada's talking about this kind of sacrifice. So looking further at the means that's proposed by Srila Vishwanath towards the end, and choosing means that are consistent with the end, one can ask oneself, what sort of world would be best to live in? You have to ask that question. And what kind of people do we want to be? I mean, these are important questions when you're thinking about what Srila Vishwanath is recommending, learn the way to do sacrifice. We have to consider, what kind of world do we want to live in? And it's actually fascinating. If you actually hear any of the news, you become aware that there's extremely, what would be the word, deceitful persons that are sometimes ruling countries. They're actually presenting to the people of their country that they actually are there to protect them, but in actual fact, they're making arrangements to harm their people with neighboring countries. I mean, it's quite shocking just listening to reports of particularly the Israeli president, bringing him up as an example, where he's done exactly that, going through the motions that he's giving protection to his people, but in actual fact, he's making arrangements to strengthen the Islamic force that are the cause of the terror for the people of his country. He actually funded them. So you hear this and you think, how's this possible? Where is the mind? How is the intelligence working? So very, very deceitful persons. So we want to really consider this. What sort of world would we like to live in? And what kind of people do we want to be? So Srila Prabhupada tells the story, and this is to highlight this idea that, compassion needs to be there in the heart. So there's this story of Ramunacharya. He was a great acharya in the Vaishnava Sampradaya. So his spiritual master gave him a mantra. And his spiritual master said, my dear boy, you chant this mantra silently. Nobody can hear. It is something. So then the disciple asked Ramunacharya, what is the effect of this mantra? And the spiritual master said, by chanting this mantra, by meditation, you'll get liberation. So meaning, you do it silently, inwardly, or by yourself. So what did Ramunacharya do? He immediately went out and in a public big meeting, he informed everybody, you chant this mantra, you'll be liberated. So he came back to the spiritual master, and the spiritual master was very angry. I told you that you should chant silently, he said. And Ramunacharya said, yes, I've committed an offense. So whatever punishment you like, you can give to me. But because you told me this mantra will liberate, I've given it publicly. Let everyone hear and be liberated. So if this mantra is going to liberate everyone, let it be publicly distributed. I'll go to hell, I don't mind. I've disobeyed your order. And the spiritual master embraced him and said, you are greater than me. So if a mantra has the power, and Srila Prabhupada asks this question, why should it be kept secret? It should be distributed because people are suffering. And Srila Prabhupada says, so Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, chant this Hare Krishna mantra, anyone will hear, even the birds and beasts will hear, and they will be liberated. So that's just a story to illustrate, looking at the means one's using and the end that's there. And Srila Vishwanath talking about how we need to learn how to do it properly, but then at the same time, one has to give consideration to using this means and the end, and how it also, what will be the meaning for myself as a person? What kind of person do I want to be, and what kind of world do I want to live in? So it becomes very clear that this recommendation, at least of the chanting japa, it's very important to distribute it publicly because of the fact that one wants to cultivate compassion. One wants to actually be able to give the opportunity to others to also have their heart cleansed and to make spiritual advancement, because that's what's going to free them from just getting sinful reactions and remaining ignorant of their actual situation. So these were some thoughts on the verse today. If there's any question, comments, anything to further the discussion, please feel free. Oh, everybody's very satisfied. Everybody has taken it. Very good. I'm quite happy.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you so much for a beautiful class. I was just reading about those 8 qualities, yogic qualities that people can, you mentioned big, small, getting big, big to small, and one of them is actually being very persuasive, being learning how to control people. So basically, like when you mentioned like some political leaders acting a certain way and having this influence, I'm wondering if they were like some kind of yogis in the past life and still have some of that power of influencing people, even though like people, at least some of them are assertive enough to see that the person has wrong values and is not gonna be, a proper leader. I'm
I
just,
didn't perfectly understand. Um, you were bringing up the mystic perfections, and you also brought up a person not being a proper leader, and I didn't quite understand the connection. So if you can just
it's just because like it's a yogic kind of like a quality you acquire, and like I was wondering if it comes from some past life or like,
okay,
previous lives
okay.
austerities. They learn this and now they're using it, and so it's kind of, and they control people, even even some of them can see it's not good, but they're being controlled, and so that's why they that's how they gain power and they make all
I
this
see.
mess.
I see. That's the connection. So, like mystic perfections, um, uh, it's from persons that are are yogis. So they're actually trying to transcend material life. So through the particular austerities that they're performing, uh, they achieve mystic perfections. So the mystic perfection can be being able to become so small they can fit through a keyhole, or being able to reach to a far distant place and get a particular fruit from a very far distant place. These are mystic perfections. So it's got nothing to do with persons who, in the present time, um, may be rulers and have control. They're in a position of control and power. And whether that position was acquired honestly is also a question there, because the character of the person may be such that they've been devious even in acquiring their position. And the fact that they have control is because it is a position of power and control, and they have that capacity to control. Now, whether it's been done in a pious or an impious way, that has to do with the character and the being of the person. So, I mean, the example that was brought up just of the Israeli president, um, it's a person who uh, seems to be very self-serving, because he's gone in and out of his position of power over 17 years, but always coming back to that position and looking more how to maintain himself in that position of power, as opposed to thinking of the good he can do for his people. So the result is that um, he has he's using devious means to maintain his power. So one of the facts that has emerged is that he funded the Hezbollah, the Islamic group that, I think it's the Hezbollah, I'm not so good with remembering, but funding the group that, or Hamas, funding the group that attacked the citizens of his country. He actually funded that group. So to actually, well, that's what I understood. So, so that's maintaining of the position of power has been done through deceitful means and not with the proper consciousness of giving protection to his people, although he's presenting as though he is. So that has nothing to do with mystic perfections, but his position of power, yes, that is from previous lifetimes that he's got that capacity to rule. But how he's using it is bringing triple reactions, because the person who is in that position of power takes 1/6 of the karma of the citizens. So he's causing suffering. So his own suffering is magnified by the suffering he's causing to his citizens. So I saw Subal had some query about what I was announcing publicly of my understanding of this particular person's rulership. So if I'm to be corrected, all right.
Well, it's always tricky to to sort of publicly also said things that others are saying publicly, but we don't fully know, especially with the internet. There's so much things that says this way or that way, that there are certain things that are sort of being factually checked, but one have to be very careful about the sources, and especially when we
Certainly.
say it. So most of the things that you heard in the internet and that we expose in the internet, we have to take it very cautiously, especially if we're going to use it, in a public
Yes,
forum.
certainly. So I can say that this did indeed come from an internet source. So, of course, one presumes that journalists are reporting honestly, but yes, one isn't in that field, and one isn't actually carefully studying the whole matter. So, this is said very lightly on my part, based on hearing from indeed a web source, as opposed to, actually being a student of politics and studying the whole matter.
Yeah.
So thank you, yes. But at least, at any rate, it's there is a question mark over this person's head, and at the present time, certain bodies in the world that are legitimate bodies, such as the United Nations, has put a label over the person's head of being a person that's falling into the category of performing crimes against humanity. So there is some disrepute that is there. So the disrepute is being officially acknowledged. So thank you very much for your kind attention. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.